You can be in a relationship with someone who smiles at you every morning, but hides behind that smile a devastating emotional immaturity. Many believe maturity comes with age, but Carl Jung proved this is one of the greatest myths of the human psyche. There are grown men with stable jobs, responsibilities, and a confident appearance who are still emotionally trapped in unresolved childhood conflicts. The most dangerous part is that most of them have no idea. This video will reveal, based on Jungian psychology, the invisible mechanisms that lead emotionally immature men to destroy relationships without realizing it. You'll understand why they act like victims, why they sabotage deep connections, and why their minds create the illusion of control while emotional chaos grows silently. Jung called this the projected shadow, a hidden side of the personality that, when ignored, turns love into destruction. By the end of this video, you'll have powerful psychological clarity to identify these patterns, protect yourself, and transform the way you see relationships. So before we go any further, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because this video goes far beyond a warning. It might change the way you see love, men, and even yourself. Click the like button now so YouTube understands. This content needs to reach more people trapped in silent cycles of emotional pain. And stay with me until the end, because in the final minutes, you'll discover the most dangerous and invisible psychological pattern Carl Jung ever revealed, a pattern that might be operating inside your relationship right now without you even noticing. Don't miss it. Emma always thought she had found the ideal man. Noah was charismatic, kind in public, said all the right things. At first, everything seemed perfect. He complimented every detail, made plans for the future, said he'd never felt anything like this. But as months passed, something began to change. Not big fights or explosions, but silence. A cutting silence. He would emotionally withdraw every time Emma expressed her needs. If she spoke about feelings, he turned cold. If she pointed out something that hurt her, he played the victim or ignored her completely. Deep down, Emma felt something was wrong, but she always ended up blaming herself. Jung said that the immature male psyche builds internal walls as a form of protection. Noah wasn't a bad person, but he was a man trapped in his past, in untreated childhood wounds, in the absence of a healthy emotional model. As a child, whenever he cried, he was called weak. When he felt fear, he was ridiculed. He grew up learning that emotions were dangerous, that vulnerability was a flaw. And now, as an adult, he repeated that pattern. Every time Emma got emotionally close, his unconscious mind interpreted it as a threat. It was as if emotional intimacy left him naked in front of ghosts he had never faced. Carl Jung warned that these men carry within them the archetype of the Puer Aeternus, the eternal boy. They don't mature. They just grow. They take on adult roles without integrating the emotional shadow inside them. And when they encounter emotionally mature women, they feel crushed by the depth. They react with distance, sarcasm, silence, or subtle attacks. Not because they don't love, but because they don't know how to love in an adult way. And the woman, not understanding, falls into a cycle of self-blame. She tries to heal, tries to save, tries to be even more understanding. But what she doesn't realize is that she's trying to fill a void she didn't create. Emma's story repeats itself every day in millions of homes. Women who love emotionally unavailable men, who confuse instability with passion, who trade peace for crumbs of attention. And that's exactly why you need to see what's behind his behavior. Jung said that until the unconscious is made conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. But this can change the moment you understand the patterns. Emotional clarity is the first step to breaking the cycle. Emma always believed that patience was the key to building a solid relationship. She tolerated Noah's sudden silences, accepted his bursts of anger as moments of stress, and justified his cold behavior with excuses she made up herself. But over time, something began to weigh on her. She felt like she was walking alone in a relationship that was supposed to be a partnership. What once seemed like just a phase began repeating itself as a pattern. Noah pulled away whenever the conversations demanded depth. He avoided any topic involving emotional responsibility, mutual growth, or long-term plans. These signs are not simple communication issues. They are symptoms of deep emotional immaturity. Jung observed that many adults, especially men, keep part of their psyche stuck in childish stages. It's as if the body grows, but the soul refuses to mature. This undeveloped part of the personality, which Jung called the shadow, is often ignored or projected onto others. The emotionally immature man cannot handle criticism, cannot hold space for vulnerability, and runs from real intimacy. Not because he doesn't want to, but because he doesn't know how. And this emotional ignorance comes at a high cost for those beside him. The partner takes on the role of therapist, mother, savior. And little by little, she erases herself. Emma began to realize that her emotional needs were always pushed aside, that her voice was only heard when she stayed silent for too long, that her love was measured by her ability to endure. And when she finally tried to confront this reality, Noah responded with guilt, victimhood, or anger. Never with awareness, never with responsibility. What's most alarming is that many of these men don't know they carry this unresolved burden. They don't see that they're trapped in an emotional model learned in childhood, in homes where emotions were ignored, repressed or punished. They were taught to be strong, but never taught to be human. They were trained to control, but not to feel. And when they enter a relationship, they repeat these patterns without realizing it. The cycle intensifies. The emotionally immature partner cannot handle the complexity of connection. He seeks relief in shallow distractions, defensive silence, impulsive behavior. And the woman beside him, without understanding what's really happening, often blames herself for not being enough. She believes that if she changes, if she gives in, if she waits a little longer, everything will get better. But the truth is, the growth she's waiting for in him only happens with awareness. And without awareness, there is no change. Jung said we don't face our shadows by accident. They appear when we're ready to confront them. And sometimes, a relationship with someone emotionally immature is the cruelest, yet clearest mirror life places in front of us. The pain he causes reveals the pain that was already inside. His absence reveals our own absence in our choices. And the collapse of the bond reveals what was never solid to begin with. What Carl Jung revealed about male emotional immaturity was not just a clinical observation, it was an archetypal truth. He called this pattern the Puer Aeternus, the eternal boy. This archetype represents the man who refuses to grow emotionally, who lives in a state of reckless idealism, fleeing from commitment, responsibility, and the depth of his own soul. He's the one who's fascinated by the new, but abandons it when the new demands depth. He's the one who loves the idea of love, but doesn't know how to sustain real love. In analytical psychology, this type of man is driven by an unconscious part of the self that refuses to integrate with the adult ego. This makes him dependent on immediate pleasures, reactive to frustration, and blind to his own defense mechanisms. And the most dangerous part is that he often appears charming. He's charismatic, intelligent, emotionally accessible in the beginning. But everything crumbles when the relationship requires surrender, maturity, and self-awareness. Other scholars, like Robert Bly, author of Iron John, also explored this male wound. Bly says many modern men were emotionally raised by women, but deprived of the masculine rites of passage that teach how to deal with pain, responsibility, and solitude. They never learned to face their own fear. They were not guided by mature male figures. That's why they avoid emotional pain as if it were a threat to their survival and repeat patterns that keep them emotionally childish, even if they have beards and bills to pay. In Eastern philosophy, like Taoism, we find the same logic. A man disconnected from his inner yin, the receptive, emotional, sensitive energy, lives in constant imbalance. He becomes a prisoner of extreme yang, strength without direction, rigidity without purpose, action without awareness. This disconnect pulls him away from himself and from others, creating shallow, reactive relationships marked by withdrawal and defensiveness. And here is a rarely spoken truth, but a deeply revealing one. These men are often drawn to mature, strong, emotionally available women, but not out of admiration. They seek in them the mother they never had, the therapist who will understand them, the anchor that will stabilize their chaos. Without realizing it, they use the relationship as a substitute for the inner work they have yet to do, and this places a massive burden on the partner, who finds herself exhausted, trying to carry a relationship where she is the only emotional adult. What Jung, Bly, and so many other traditions show us is that without confronting their own shadow, no man can truly love. He will only be able to connect emotionally once he has faced his own ghosts. Until then, every relationship he touches will be a reflection of this unresolved wound. Maybe now you're wondering how to clearly tell the difference between dealing with an emotionally immature man and someone who's just going through a hard phase. The line between these two states can be subtle, but Jung left clear signs for those who know how to observe. One of the first signs is the repeated avoidance of emotional responsibility. This man avoids deep conversations, reacts with silence or aggression when confronted, and often plays the victim, even in situations he caused himself. He repeats patterns, but never admits he's repeating them. And when everything falls apart, he blames the world, the circumstances, or even you. Another important sign lies in the cycle of idealization and rejection. At first, he sees his partner as perfect. He says she's different from all the others, that now things will finally be different. But as soon as she expresses a legitimate need or a differing opinion, he starts pulling away. The charm becomes pressure, the presence becomes absence, the affection becomes punishment, and he himself doesn't understand why. This happens because deep in his unconscious, true love activates the deepest wounds. Intimacy reveals the parts he tried the hardest to hide, and instead of facing it, he runs. But here's the most delicate part. What Jung discovered is that many women also carry an unconscious pattern that draws them to this kind of man, not out of weakness, but as an internal attempt to heal an old wound. It's as if, by healing the other, she could finally heal herself. But that never happens, because you can't do the work that the other refuses to do. And the more you try to compensate for his immaturity, the more emotionally sick you become. These patterns are not easy to see at first. They come disguised as intensity, chemistry, or instant connection. The emotionally immature man is often good with words, but incapable of backing them up with action. He makes promises easily, but disappears when those promises require consistency. And when you start asking questions, he flips the logic. He says you're asking for too much, that you're too sensitive, that you're ruining what was perfect, and, if you're not aware, you end up believing him. But there's a specific point where all of this starts to become painfully clear. A particular situation that exposes the root of emotional immaturity so strongly that it can't be ignored anymore. And that's what we're going to talk about next. A silent pattern that destroys relationships from the inside out. One that almost no one notices until it's too late. Remember Emma? That woman who thought she was living a great love story, but was actually trapped in a cycle of quiet pain. She spent years trying to understand why, despite all her efforts, the relationship kept feeling more and more empty. Until one day, she had a moment of clarity. During a seemingly normal argument, she realized she wasn't talking to a grown man. She was arguing with a reflection of his fear, with the anger he felt toward himself, with the emptiness he had carried since childhood. And that's when everything changed. When Emma started studying Jungian psychology, she understood that he wasn't capable of giving her what she needed, not because he didn't love her, but because he didn't even know who he was. He moved through the world wearing the mask of an adult, but emotionally, he was still that boy who had never been seen by his father. who had never been validated, by his mother, who had learned to hide his feelings just to survive. He didn't know what love was because he had never learned what self-love even meant. And that's the turning point. When you realize that it's not your job to fix the other person, something new starts to build within you. Instead of investing all your energy trying to prove your worth to someone emotionally blind, you begin to look at yourself more clearly. You start healing the part of you that believed it needed to be saved by someone else's love. That is real psychological empowerment. It's not about becoming cold, distant, or untouchable. It's about stopping the habit of accepting emotional crumbs and calling it a feast. Jung's psychology teaches us that every unconscious pattern can be transformed, that the pain you've experienced doesn't have to repeat itself, that it's possible to break the toxic cycle and make space for conscious relationships built on mutual exchange, real presence, and truth. But that only begins when you step out of the role of the rescuer and into the role of the main character in your own life story. Emma didn't leave that relationship with hatred. She left with awareness. And that awareness was the first step toward creating something she had never lived before, an emotional life where self-love was non-negotiable. And the most powerful part is that when she stopped chasing after someone to fix, she started attracting people who were already healing themselves. This could be your turning point too, but it takes courage, because the next step requires you to look at something you may have been ignoring for years. Something we're going to reveal now, in the final part of this video, a truth that may be uncomfortable, but is absolutely necessary, and that can change forever the way you choose to relate. Have you ever stopped to wonder why so many men seem to grow up on the outside but remain emotionally stuck in adolescence? The answer isn't a lack of love. It lies in something much deeper, darker, and silently devastating. It's a psychological block that works like an invisible anchor, keeping them from maturing emotionally. Carl Jung called it the Puer Aeternus, the eternal boy. But what most people don't know is that this archetype has an even more dangerous shadow, one that disguises itself as charm, hides in romantic promises, and fools even the most self-aware women. This is where many get lost. They confuse sensitivity with maturity, intensity with presence, passion with commitment. But there's a clear difference between a man who feels and a man who holds, between someone who gets enchanted and someone who builds. And that difference lies where almost no one is looking. There's a subtle pattern, a specific sign that shows up early in relationships and reveals with precision who is still an emotional boy and who is truly a whole man. In the next video, we're going to reveal exactly what this sign is, how to recognize it in the very first dates, and most importantly, how to strengthen your emotional intelligence so you never again fall into the cycle of empty connections that leave you drained. If this touched something inside you, don't leave without subscribing to the channel right now. Turn on the notification bell so you're alerted the moment the next video comes out, because it's going to complete everything you've learned today. Leave a like if this content made you reflect, and share it with a friend who might be going through exactly this but hasn't realized it yet. Your action could be the beginning of someone else's emotional freedom. And tell me in the comments, have you ever been in a relationship with an emotionally immature man and only saw it later? Your story might help other women see what they still can't. We're only beginning to dive into this psychological universe that can radically transform the way you experience love. I'll see you in the next video.